This is, and you might not even believe it until you've read it with me, but this is, and I promise, a British newspaper written by British journalists about trans people, and it's not just neutral. It's like a good article written by cis people, and it's a good article. This isn't the one-off like chance where one of the more left-wing papers lets a trans person write some brief thing, vaguely mentions politics. This is a full-on, we're going to write about politics as cis people in a British newspaper, and it's going to be decent. Now, I am just going to disclaimer this. As we are going to see, I am quoted in this article. So, maybe that's why I think it's good. But actually, the bits they quote me on aren't the bits that I think are important and aren't the bits that I really think are that good. So, I mean, it's nice they chose to include me, but the bits they wrote are actually the best bit. But this whole article is amazing, so I thought we'd just go for it. So this is about the Supreme Court ruling, and the headline is, Supreme Court gender decision achieved nothing and was a waste of money. And when I first saw that, I was like, this headline could kind of go either way, because it could be gender critical saying, we've changed the law and they're still not eradicating trans people. What a waste of time and money. Or it could be like someone presenting a more neutral view, saying, yes, nothing's really changed. Or it could be someone arguing that this hasn't benefited women, which is the angle they've gone for. 11 weeks after the ruling, the two authors tear it apart and explain how the media is making matters worse. So we typed women into Google News this morning. It gave us one woman beaten, another one poisoned by an unlicensed Botox clinic, several women pictured for an objectifying Daily Mail article about sex faces, and an op-ed in a Spectator titled Ofcom still isn't sure what a woman is. Goodness. The latter involves some bloke called Toby complaining about how woman isn't being used properly as a term, as he peddles his own agendas of transphobia and climate skepticism. His view is that the press should sooner be questioning the climate crisis than the clear scientific biological definition of a woman. He has no idea. There is no biological definition of a woman, and he couldn't give one if he tried. But anyway, so they've started off like, okay, this is actually going to be not just neutral, but like pro-trans, and it's like written in a kind of chatty way. 11 weeks on, the Supreme Court ruling described by the British press as historic and a vindication for feminism, in quotes, achieved quite a lot of nothing. We were told it would bring clarity to equality law and reduce male violence in single-sex spaces. In reality, the confusion wrought has seen a new misogyny law thrown out and the Labour Women's Conference postponed. Okay, so first point I want to make on this. It's good to see articles in the mainstream press written by trans people. Sometimes it happens, almost never happens. This is written by cis people. Okay, but it's still good. It's also good when articles are written specifically about this is happening and this is harming trans people. That's good to see. But I think it's also good to see cis women writing explicitly, not just in response to, but like directly taking on the point of, is this doing anything for women like them, to the average woman in the country? Is anyone benefiting from this at all? No. And they're like, that's their like core argument here. They're not saying the decision has harmed trans people, or we support trans rights in principle, or like his arguments from both sides. They're just going in. The claim was this would help women, and it hasn't. And I don't think there's much of this angle, like this specific cis women feminists writing something saying this hasn't helped us. They don't just totally focus on cis women, but I think it's a good leading point, because the reason is I just think cis people are more likely to listen to this. If a trans person writes an article saying the ruling has harmed trans people, people are like, at best, poor trans people. I don't know. Most people don't care about trans rights either way. Like 95% of people don't care about trans rights at all. But hearing that things affect cis women does motivate people to act. So go on. Toby says the definition of a woman is now a settled matter. Keir Starmer says a woman is an adult human female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. And so our first exercise on this week's podcast was to define adult female, but we couldn't pin down a biological criteria that comprehensively captures all cis women. Just written in a British news article. So good to see. Chromosomes, gonads, genitals, hormone levels, facial hair. Someone always falls through the cracks. Like, this is what I feel like I've been shouting about on this show for years now, and on every other show I've ever been on. And it's just so rare to see this being like the opening art like angle. Sometimes you see it like they'll say biological female 50 times, then at the bottom they'll be like, there is some debate about blah, blah, blah. No, they're just going straight in with, we tried to define it, but there actually isn't a definition. Amazing. Like, this is the kind of thing that we need to say all the time when anyone mentions a Supreme Court definition, Supreme Court ruling, to just be like, they might have claimed that sex is now binary and settled, but there actually isn't in biology a real definition. Like, that's such an important point to all of this. And they're calling out another news organisation in the UK, The Independent. Their solution has been to equate biologically female with assigned female at birth. But that doesn't hold up because transitioning people's biology changes, and so people born male may become biologically female. Can you see why I'm so hype about this article now? Right. The Byline Times is not the biggest newspaper in the UK, and this is not going to be front page headline news in physical print in stores everywhere. But this is some level of mainstream, and it's just this, like, it's so good to see this, like, and it's a left-wing paper. It's so good to see this actually being taken on, because like they say, The Independent, that's a kind of left-wing paper, and they've just gone all in on this biological female bullshit because they don't listen to trans people at all, and they don't seem to care about what's true. And here they are calling out. It's just so good to see that in, like, written by people. It's just so good. Anyway, meanwhile, some cis women are born without ovaries or with a rogue Y chromosome. Elaine Khalif was born a woman given... Oh, okay, here's the first the first criticism I have. She was born a girl. She was not born a woman. No one is born a woman. She was born a baby, which they declared was a girl, and she grew up thinking she was a girl. Anyway, that's not a big criticism. Given a female birth certificate and then deemed to have failed one of these modern biology readings, does she now lose protection under the UK equality law? If so, do not tell us this was done in our name. A good argument. Might be nice to point out that, and if it's happened to her, it could happen to you or your mum. But, you know, I can't be too critical. This is like a 9.5 out of 10 so far. Like, it's good. For our part, it seems counterintuitive to put the definition of womanhood to paper. We never felt the need to contemplate it before the media decided to lynch any MP who didn't have a simple answer. Another good argument. Prescriptive definitions of what a woman should have never worked in women's interests. Indeed, the entire point of feminism has been challenging restrictive characteristics. So clarity, no. We've not been given that. The implication that trans people are coming along and saying science is wrong is a piece of propaganda, said our guest. Okay, here we go. Here's the bit for me. Said our guest, LGBT activist, YouTuber, metalhead, and insect enthusiast. Katie Montgomery. Anyway, okay, right. So, there's always an example of a woman who doesn't fit into your biological definition that ends up being a philosophy problem. Okay, they've got some quotes for me. They're fine quotes. And I'm not saying this is good because of my contribution. I went on this podcast. They said the name at the top, Media Storm. You should go check it out. It's on Spotify. It's probably on other podcast places that you can listen to podcasts. I thought it went quite well. I think they were very good Hosts. But I didn't know they were going to write an article about it. I wasn't interviewed for this article. I didn't have input in this in any way. Seeing this article was kind of good to see them. Like, we went and discussed some things, and they asked me a few questions, and they seemed to have agreed with the points I was making, and importantly, like, laid them out in such a good way, and like presented them in a good argument, like a good, well-structured argument. But anyway, yeah, who cares? But my contribution here is the worst bit so far. How about the second point, that this ruling addresses male violence in single-sex spaces despite a lack of evidence of attacks by trans people in public toilets? We set our intern the task of finding them, and she identified only one case involving a trans teenager from 6 years ago. Exactly. Rapes and sexual assaults are happening there. Freedom of information requests on the topic have been almost flatly denied by the police, but we managed to locate one data set, Gwent, which covers 600 square miles of rural Wales. So not a hub of human interactions. You would expect there to be more in like central London. Counted 134 recorded incidents of rape and assault in a public toilet in over 5 years. So exactly, like, here's the argument that it's just all nonsense. This claim that trans people are a danger to women's spaces. It's just flatly false. There's never been any evidence for it. They've never even attempted to provide evidence for it. And I think that's like a core point, is they make every claim that transphobes make is just completely unevidenced. Are we seriously supposed to feel pacified by this bullshit? Well, I didn't see that they had written the word bullshit. That's pretty heavy going. Supreme Court ruling, this crest transphobia being peddled in our name. Yeah, so they're saying the majority of cis women support trans rights here. Some 1,000 cis women joined the April 19th protest against the ruling, yet The Guardian wrote, trans activists rally in London against gender ruling. Thousands of trans and non-binary people thronged Parliament Square. Exactly. Some 1,000 cis women joined. They all, like, the media loves to do this. They describe every trans person who does anything, like says, hey, I don't want to be fired from my job. They're like, you're a trans activist. Or maybe it's just like normal people, just saying that they don't want their lives to be ruined. And then, of course, they also brand them all trans people, even though the majority of anyone at a trans rights protest is probably going to be a cis person. But they've crammed in so many like arguments into this article already in such dense time. Such a short amount of time, they have densely packed in arguments, which is good to see. Something about for women Scott, blah, blah, blah. Talking about not in our name, which you can still sign, by the way. If you're a cis woman watching this, not anyone else, not for you, you can sign this petition, not in our name. They nearly have 40,000 signatures just saying taking away trans people's rights doesn't benefit us. So if you're interested in that, you may sign that. So yeah, they say, I might as well, I can't skip over their like one core argument, can I? Their one core, like the strongest point. Let's make one thing clear. When we are in bathrooms or changing rooms or any rooms with trans women, we do not experience their presence in any remarkable way. We experience it as we experience each other's as women. This is not some social justice argument. This is how we feel. We do not feel fear. We do not feel difference. To be honest, we do not feel a fucking thing. Oh, okay. I didn't realize they're swearing in this article. I missed that. We are simply taking a piss. Yes, mate. The mainstream media is not interested in platforming this view because it does not fit into their attention-grabbing, debate-style reportage. Instead, they exclusively pit gender-critical cis women against trans activists, which makes it almost impossible for trans people to self-advocate. Katie told us, okay, here's another quote from me. I'm not going to read out my quote because you can listen to the podcast to hear it or read this article properly. Yeah, that's basically the whole article. Okay, so it's a decent article the whole way through, but again, I just want to highlight this point here. Again, saying about the definition of here. So as our first exercise, we tried to define adult female, but we couldn't pin down a biological criteria that comprehensively captures all cis women. They're just writing this down. This is like a core argument. And I think this always should be our core argument going forwards. And it should be what all journalists should be pointing out. Like, that is factually true. You cannot do it, which is why no one has done it. And then they're directly calling out this garbage editorial position, which is to equate biologically female with assigned female at birth, or to say that biological sex and birth sex are the same, which is true for 99% of people, but it is not true for everyone. And that's why, and like, whenever you're writing this stuff, you're talking about trans people who are the people it's not true for. And so what you're saying is factually false. And it's not just like incidentally false, but whatever, carry on. It's like the core propaganda point of the anti-trans side is to deny that trans people's sex changes. Like, that's one of their core arguments, one of their two core arguments, along with sex being binary, which is also false and is also like implied by this way of talking about people as biological females and biological males. Like, what does that mean in this context when people don't fit into those boxes? You don't even acknowledge them. So it's good to see that like being directly called out, and I just think we need to do more of it. This is like the two positions, or the one larger argument, which I just think should be one of the things we're pushing the most, because it's just a flaw in the Supreme Court ruling. It's a flaw in the entire gender critical argument, and it's just one of these things which they have no response to, because it's literally the science which is opposed to their position. So as much as they change the law, we still have like actual measurable reality on our side. So yeah, I just think it's one of our lifelines. Maybe I'm being too optimistic that, like, I always think you can't fight science forever. You can only fight science for a long time. And for example, when they discovered that the Earth went around the sun rather than the other way round, they didn't like that at all, and they fought that for a long time. But eventually it got to the point where it was undeniably true, and now it's just like common knowledge. I don't know how long they fought that for, and maybe I'm too optimistic in thinking you can't fight science forever, so therefore in my lifetime we will be to a position where we're no longer fighting science. But kind of internationally, we're seeing the biggest pushback against science, I mean, of my lifetime. And it doesn't seem close to the end. And it seems to have been getting worse for a long time. Maybe they can fight science for decades. Maybe they can fight science for more than 100 years. It's possible. I mean, the beauty of science is however much of it they destroy, eventually we'll rediscover it all. Because it's true. And it's like discoverably true. But it still does set people back a long time. And like how much information was lost when they destroyed the research into trans people in the Nazi takeover in the 40s or 30s. Like they burned all of the books on trans people. We probably got to the point where we got all that knowledge back. But like how many decades did it set us like as a species back? And how many people lived and died in that time missing out on information which we already once knew, and then we no longer knew anymore? Don't know, but I still do think that it's important to push this point, because like it's not even that complicated, and it's like their position is brazenly false. And like there's only so long they can rely on propaganda. But anyway, check that article out and let me know what you think if you listen to the podcast.